hand it over to Magda.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Magda, Garncarz with Beauty Mention. AIM is also a big supporter and fan of MassMEC, so thank you for giving us the opportunity to be involved today. I have to my right, yes, it is my right side, four wonderful panelists that are going to talk about all things sustainability within manufacturing. So maybe I can just get right into that. First, we have Phillip DelMonti, VP of Operations at Joseph's Pasta. Next to him, we've got Finch, Energy Efficiency Consultant with Eversource, Kenney, Vice President of Early Bird Power, and Micaelah Morrill, an Innovation Ecosystem Consultant, currently VP of Business Development at Mass Robotics, and the Director of External Affairs for BU's Innovate at BU initiative. Did I get it right?
I'm just the Innovation Ecosystem Consultant.
You're just the Innovation Consultant.
Don't trip. Oh, no, I see it
so
with the camera.
I'll let the panelists go into a deeper dive and a deeper intro on them, and we'll start with Micaelah.
Hi everyone, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, short afternoon. As Magda said, I have worked in the Boston Innovation Ecosystem. I worked in International Innovation Ecosystem. What that means is I work with a lot of startups. I work with incubators, accelerators. I have had roles at many of them, although I don't currently work for any single one. I think what I've done is try to keep a pulse on what is new and what is emerging, and then throughout a lot of my career, I've tried to help those people physically build things. I don't work a lot with software startups because I don't find it as interesting, although they are no less important. And so I'm here today in case anyone has questions about why should I work with startups? How is that useful? Is that useful? And if we're talking about it in sustainability, I think one of the ways you can think about that is there's ways, you're going to hear a lot about energy audits, and you should because they're important. And I think when you know some of the perhaps gaps that are in your system, there's probably a place where you can even go a step further around. And one of the ways you can do that is figure out how to plug into the innovation ecosystem here in Massachusetts. I put this picture up because this is not a surprise to anyone, but what it really means to work in these places is there's universities, startups, OEMs, SMEs. It requires all of these people to really make innovation happen. It couldn't happen without manufacturers, but I think there is some give back that startups can do too. And so we'll get to that, or we'll see, or you can talk to me about it afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Micaelah, and we'll go over to Magda.
Hey everyone, Finch with Eversource. Eversource is a proud sponsor of MassSave. If I could just poll the room really quick, who's had a MassSave energy audit at their house? So for anybody that's not familiar, MassSave is the name of an energy efficiency program sponsored by a lot of the major utilities throughout the state. So not only just similar to your home, they sent in an energy auditor. You might have gotten some rebates for heating and cooling equipment or insulation in your house. We do the same thing with commercial customers and manufacturers specifically. So MassSave will help to pay for energy audits of your facility to identify opportunity, help you save money, increase operational efficiency, environmental health and safety. There's a lot of downstream benefits for having an energy-specific audit, and then there's also incentives to help pay for all of the projects that are implemented, similar to how you may have gotten a rebate for insulation or a heat pump at your house. So this is a very general list of some of the things that we may find in a manufacturing facility that would potentially be eligible for incentive. There's also a lot of things not on the list. We call them custom process measures, but really anything that would have an energy impact, we'd at least like to have a conversation, see if there's an opportunity for us to help to incentivize, to meet your own internal goals to save energy and be good stewards of the environment and meet your sustainability goals. So look forward to talking a bit more with you later.
Thank you, Nate, and we'll go over to Kenney now.
Hi everyone. So as Magda said, my name is Kenney, and our firm, Early Bird Power, is a privately held company that's based in Milton, Massachusetts. We were selected by Mass Development back in 2015 to manage the MassMEC program, and that's the Massachusetts Manufacturers Energy Collaborative. The goal of the program is essentially to provide you with a resource to help you lower your energy costs. and to the extent that you want to be more sustainable, to assist you in exploring those. So think of us as a clearinghouse or a phone a friend for all things energy. Typically what we do is we start out with a utility bill audit. We'll look at 1 month's worth of electricity and natural gas bills, and we'll identify any of the low-hanging fruit that might be there. We often find, for example, that manufacturers are paying sales tax on their utility bills, and you are exempt from that. And it can show up in different places. It's easy to miss. At 6.25%, we often are able to get refunds back a year. I just got a $19,000 refund for a client. They were pretty happy about that. And so ultimately, that's just, it's easy. It doesn't require a lot of heavy lifting. We look at competitive options for your natural gas and electricity supply. We're in a deregulated market. You can look at those options. And then from there, the sort of use less and go green aspect, we coordinate with Eversource, with National Grid, and their energy efficiency vendors, their partners, in terms of providing those mass save audits. So the utility can work with you directly. They also have vendors. They're vendor neutral around that. If you have vendors you want to work with, they can coordinate with the utility to provide those. But getting an energy audit is a great idea and starting place, and that's free. And then lastly, just looking at other things renewable related. If you wanted to explore on-site solar, be an off-taker for a community solar project, if you're looking for zero emission energy supply sources, we can help with all of that. But basically, our view is, if there's a way that we can connect you with partners that are going to help your business save money and be more efficient, be more sustainable, then we want to be a call for that. So look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Sean. And now we'll move on to Phillip.
All right, so I'm Phillip DelMonti. I run Joseph's Pasta operations side, and we're your case study. So our motto on the operations side is using automation education to make the highest quality product as cheaply as possible is what it boils down to. And there's an important differentiation between I'm going to put a robot in and I'm going to get rid of 2 people and I'm going to save money, compared to I'm going to simplify the process, I'm going to make the HMI as intuitive as possible, and I'm going to make it so that I don't need a college-educated individual to run it. Right, so there's 2 different facets of automation. Everybody focuses on the robot because some people love the robot, some people hate the robot, but at Joseph's we focus more on the other side. So we allow ourselves the ability, we can hire straight out of college, we can train from within, right? So it opens our job, our labor pool up significantly by doing these activities. So as I talk about automation, that's what I mean by automation. And a little bit about our cultural yo-yo that we went through. So we were started by an entrepreneur, and I imagine I have a few of you in the room, right? And kind of the way that works is trying to get a business off the ground, don't spend any money, unless you really have to. So we did that for about 15 years, and that's how Joseph's put themselves on the map. Nestle USA decided, really cool business, and I want to do a couple things with it, and they purchased Joseph's Pasta in 2007. So we went from don't spend anything to literally the richest food company in the world. So we had more money than we were ever going to spend, more resources than we ever wanted in the plant, and a ton of edicts put down from corporate on what you're going to do. And one of those was sustainability and efficiency, because Europe is way ahead of us in those games, right? 2014, we were sold to private equity. So don't spend any money. Here's as much money as you can ever think of. How much money can you make me, right? So we went through that transition, and that was difficult, right? Through that whole time, 7 years is a while. You can start to grow roots in a culture, but private equity walks in. They were with us for 3 years, and then we were sold again to another private equity group. The new private equity group was much more do what you need to do to get the business to run. So we've kind of settled into that whole way of thinking, which has been great. But through that whole time frame, we never lost our eye on what our main mission was, and that's 0, 1, 100. We have it on the ceiling, we have it on the walls, it's all over the plant. 0 waste, 1 team, 100% engaged. So there's a lot of reasons why, right? Waste is money. If you have multiple people operating within the plant on their own agendas, you're not going to get anywhere. And if everybody's engaged, you have really good employees. So we never lost sight of that, and where that got us to is we are, to this day, still landfill free, so we're 100% certified landfill free. We get the credits for cardboard recycling, we get the credits for baling plastics. Our waste gets incinerated. Our food waste goes to a livestock where we get credit for the food. So 100% landfill free. We're a member of SMETA. I don't know if anybody's familiar with SMETA, but that's an audit that's done to make sure that you source your materials ethically, you produce your materials ethically, and you sell your materials ethically. Ethically includes waste, can't use child labor. You have to have all the certifications from the suppliers on that this food is, if it is organic, is it really organic? This is the ingredient statement, it's validated, also those types of things. We're also a member of the Marine Stewardship Council, which means that do we source our materials from suppliers who source those animals in a way that sustains the species. So there's multiple facets to efficiency and sustainability. And we hit all of them still to this day, even through all those changes. And you kind of ask yourself, well, why be sustainable? Number one, as a business owner, business person who runs the organization, you're responsible for that. You're financially responsible for that. You're fiduciarily responsible for that. You signed up for that, right? You need to run that business in a way that saves energy, saves the planet, saves your employees. You can't think tomorrow. You got to think about a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. We've also hit, I wouldn't call them hurdles, but there are challenges now with the way the economy is. It's far more of a global economy than it's ever been. And we've talked about, especially out here, about Trump and tariffs and all these other things, but boil it down even further. We ship to Canada, we ship to Mexico, we ship to Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. They have different rules. They look at things differently. I use an example in the last breakout. My wife works in the car industry. They'll produce a product in the US, they'll ship it to Canada to paint it, and then they'll ship it back to the US to install it. So when it's crossing borders like that, you are subject to these other regulations. We also have very large customers. When I say large, Walmart, Target, Aldi's, these types of customers who say, hey, great, love your product, want to do business with you. However, let me see your SMETA audit. Let me see your sustainability plan. Let me see your carbon emissions reduction plan. All these different things. And those are things that we're starting to come across. And speaking again to globally, Europe, you can kind of play with the number a little bit, but they are 10 to 20 years ahead of us when it comes to their sustainability practices. I was just talking with the ownership of a company in Belgium, and they every year submit a 120-page report on their sustainability and environmental plan for reducing carbon footprint. 120 pages every year. We have it in our mission statement, right? So this is a huge focus for them. And when you're talking global, I'm sure there's people or individuals or companies in the room who are you're going to look globally, you're going to look to other places to sell, you're going to run up against those hurdles. It's far better to think about them up front as you're designing your plan, your line, or your mission statement than to go to the bargaining table or go sign the contract and say, oh, P.S., you have to do X, Y, and Z, and now you're behind the 8 ball. Now your design phase goes from 6 months to 6 weeks, so on and so forth. So we try to stay ahead of all these things. We talk to other companies and we network and we say, well, what are you seeing? What challenges are you seeing? We want to get ahead of this stuff. So we found it far better to be in front than behind. And so how does MassSAVE fit in? A couple jaws hit the ground when I said this, so don't crucify me here. But we have a 160,000 square foot facility, and we do not have an engineer. We have 9 ammonia compressors. We have 4 evaporators on the roof. We have all this equipment. We don't have an engineer. We have people who know what they're doing, right? But if you ask them to pull out a degree from a college, we don't have it. So then you start to go, well, I could go to third party and they can come and they can look at this stuff, tell me, hey, you got 3 or 4 years left. You got to make sure that you think about replacing this. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up the company that made it and go, hey, I need this exact same thing. Can you put it on the roof? Because that's my extent of my knowledge. MassSAVE walks in. They bring in engineers. They look at the project. They say, hey, if you added another 10 tons of capacity, if you added an extra VFD, if you change the way the baffles work or the heat exchanger is sized, you're eligible for a rebate. So now I'm paying the same amount for the equipment that I already have, but it's better. Not only is it newer, it's more efficient, it has better controls. I can pick up my phone from my house and I can see how it's running or what it's doing, all for the same money. And, you know, I also got jaws on the ground for this. I didn't do anything for that. I contacted my local representative that I'm assigned. They handle my contract. I have access to them all the time. And they did all the background work for me. It's really a wonderful, wonderful benefit. And then also when you talk about the study for your usage, I've had my CFMs measured on my air compressors. I know how many therms I use, what my gas pressure is. I know how the heat exchange rate I have on my ammonia, and I didn't have to pay for any of that. I didn't have to really do any work myself, with the exception of, hey, can you help me with this? This is something we want to look at. I'm sure there's energy savings there. Can you help? And then they come in. You know, the commandos come in the parachute and help us out at the plant. And biggest, obviously, when you're running a Morrill facility, you got responsibility for P&L, you're saving money, right? It is a much better pill for my board to swallow when I say, hey, I'm gonna buy this $200,000 thing, but I'm gonna get it for 150 grand. Sometimes they don't even care. It's like, wow, okay, you're getting such a good deal, let's go with that. And the details kind of slip through the cracks. I know what they are, but maybe they don't focus as much because the savings is there. So some of the examples that we've had and other things that I want to point out. So we have steam traps. I already told you guys I'm not an engineer, we don't have one. We have over 150 steam traps in the plant. I couldn't tell you anything about them. I know what they do, generally, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. We did a steam trap survey, P.S. it was free. And they went through and checked all 150 plus of our steam traps. They put a tag on them with a QR code I can scan with my phone, or I can go to a website that only I have access to that lists out all my heat pumps and condensate return lines and everything like that. Serial number, model number, what kind of condition it was in, what the last work done was on it, what the last work done on it was, all these things right on the website. I didn't do any of it. I made the call. I fielded the person when they showed up. I had one of my technicians walk around with them for a day, but now I have all my equipment categorized, cataloged at my fingertips. So when you talk about automation, simplification, I'm not an engineer, but I can tell you where all the steam traps are. Now I have a map of it. I can tell you when they were installed, I can tell you what was wrong with them, I can tell you what they do. All for free. So it's really, for businesses large and small, it's a huge benefit that I think it gets overlooked often. And when we talk about the last one, I'll jump ahead. Waste is easy when you see it on the floor. All right, when we make pasta, or Joseph's pasta, it's easy when you see it on the floor. I walk around, I see some pasta on the floor, I get aggravated. It's waste. Why'd you throw it on the floor? What I don't see is that the boiler's running. I'm running a 350 horsepower boiler to run one line that's way too big. Or my steam trap doesn't work and all my condensates go into the drain. I don't see that, but that's also waste. Utility bills, I was just going over this with our representative from National Grid. Our, I think it was gas, is doubled in term cost. So I don't see anybody saying, hey, I'm gonna work on the utility costs, they're gonna come down next year. It's not gonna happen. So my fixed factory overhead continues to creep up and up and up. Even though I use less therms, I'm still paying the same. Now the aggravation, I'm avoiding aggravation. You're not gonna avoid the cost increases. You can try to negotiate, you can work all those things, it's gonna happen. But I can mitigate that cost and keep supplying my consumer at the same rate at least. And it's all offered to you if you guys choose to pick up the phone and make that phone call. So I can talk forever, but you guys can ask questions and I will try to answer. Well, I'll try to answer.
Thank you, Phillip. So we've heard a lot from practitioners that represent various different parts of this sector, right? We've heard from an expert in the innovation ecosystem working with startups, from an energy consulting firm who can help you go beyond an energy audit, then from the utility practitioner who will make sure you have that audit and can get you started with at least the very first steps that yield really great results, and then a practitioner who has probably come into contact with all of these different aspects of the ecosystem. So just to start us off with the first question, from all of your various perspectives, what is the low-hanging fruit that everybody should be doing today? Micaelah, you wanna go first?
You should get an energy audit immediately. And, nope, I'll stop there.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So the energy audits,
Mhm.
we just had one and we have 2 huge compressors, air compressors, that I'm sure, just like every other manufacturing operation, has air leaks everywhere that we could, do better on. Our audit that we brought in someone is actually gonna cost us about $8,000 to do. I'm just wondering, are there certain people that you go through that it doesn't cost you? Like, how do you go through that, right? Because
Yeah,
I have not
I
come
can take
upon
that one.
anyone who says, I'll do it for free.
I think they can tell you.
So was the audit through your utility rep? So there's,
It was actually through, MassSave.
it was,
Yes.
yep. So there's a few different levels of audit, right? So, what we've been kind of discussing here is what, we call a scoping study. And that's us sending an energy engineering firm in to identify opportunity. Once an opportunity's been, found and you're ready to do a deeper dive, that is what we call a TA study, right? A technical assistance study. And that is a much more precise deep dive. There might be a little bit of design work involved. There could be, the vendor may be getting proposals for you. So sometimes there is a co-payment for a TA study versus like a general scoping study, which is usually completely funded by the utility.
Okay, cause they were saying that 50% of that would be able to come back if we went with these guys from the.
Oh, so
The
yeah, so what you're
MassSave
referring to is
piece.
is like the compressed air leak survey.
Correct,
Yeah, so that is 100% funded as well.
okay.
For that's a little bit different than what we call like a technical assistance study. With compressed air leaks, we call it 50-50-50. So you have a PO with a compressed air vendor to do the leak survey. We will reimburse half of the survey up front, but ultimately we're in it for the savings. We don't care about studying stuff, we actually want the savings. So we pay the other half of the survey after you've actually completed the repairs. We don't want the survey to sit on a shelf somewhere and no work's actually done. So the repairs, so once you've done the repairs, the repairs are a custom incentive, right? So we get the survey from the vendor and we say, okay, you're gonna save X amount of kilowatts if you do all of the repairs they recommended. The utility will come up with a custom incentive just for the repairs piece, and once you complete that, you get that custom incentive plus the other half of the survey at the time that the repairs are completed. So there still is some upfront out of pocket, but ultimately the survey will be 100% funded once you've completed the repairs.
Okay, yeah, I
can get a
just
little
didn't
confusing.
know, yeah, I was like, wait, is there a bunch of people somewhere that do it for free, but I want their names?
Ultimately, there's probably about 10 different types of like studies you could do, right?
Yeah.
So a steam leak, steam trap study, that is a study. Compressed air leak study. Those studies can be done by vendors that would actually be doing the repairs. A separate kind of way that we look at it is there's also what we call a bench of technical assistance engineering firms. They never do any of the implementation, like they're not actually going to do a project, but they specialize in identifying opportunities in all sorts of different manufacturing processes. So that's really the first step in a lot of those identification phases is let's get one of these firms in there and they'll come up with a whole report saying, hey, you've got these 10 different things that we identified. One of them's on your process line doing controls, there's heat recovery, there's compressed air leaks, we can set you up with a vendor for that. It's, insulation on this equipment, and here's your ballpark costs and ballpark savings for all of that. And then we can dive deeper on the individual projects, once we have a conversation with you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other low-hanging fruit we want to identify at the outset?
right out of the gate, contact your rep. You know, and if you don't have one, just call the number on the bill, and then they'll set you up with somebody. You don't realize the savings until you just got to scratch the surface and get started.
There's also a new section of, if you go to masssave.com, it's a really good resource. There's a category for residential, there's a category for commercial. There's also a section that it's a couple layers in, but you can actually type in like the zip code and the type of customer you are, and it will give you the contact info for the specific utility rep. So like my cell phone number and email is on there. So if you're a manufacturer in Western Mass and you're an Eversource customer, if you put that information in, you get my cell phone number, and that's right on masssave.com. I can forward the file path and how to get to that to Judy.
Sure.
To advertise that out, but that's a great way to find an actual person, you know, not a 1-800 number.
And this next question, I think it could be for any of you, but also for anyone in the room. So as you work with companies that are looking to implement some of these sustainability and energy efficiency incentives and initiatives, what are some of the main challenges that they face that keep them from actually going through with it? And then for anyone in the room, if any of you have any examples of, you know, you tried to get an audit, but ultimately something kept you from progressing with it, please let us know as well. Anybody want to go first?
The one that comes to mind for me, and is, I think it's the only one that I can think of, is we tried to do a project and the vendor actually wouldn't cooperate. So we were trying to put an evaporator in a condenser on the roof, and pretty obviously there's cost savings there, right? It's a huge piece of equipment that's not very efficient when it's 25 years old. And we couldn't get the vendor to work with MassSave. They would ignore the emails or ignore the calls. They lost the job.
Did you find a different one?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that. That's, I mean, again, in terms of the MassMEC program, we're there as a resource, we're vendor neutral. So the idea is if you run into that problem, you know, there are lots of vendors that Eversource works with, and we have a lot of visibility to that. So again, we can, if you're in that position where, I think one of the answers to your question is also, you know, the people in particularly smaller operations just don't have the resources to dedicate to the projects. You know, it's like, I have a day job, and this is now additive. And so, you know, everyone that we're talking about here are additional resources, and that's how we view it. Our role is to bring resources to bear so that it complements what you're doing, it makes your life easier, it doesn't become, you know, onerous, and you bring expertise. So, you know, we want to be that resource to say, okay, who's the right thing for you? You know, we're neutral to the marketplace, but what's the outcome you're looking for, and what are the resources that would be most helpful to you?
Right, yeah.
I just want to add like a quick thing, because I always think about this when I'm advocating on behalf of like a startup or working with someone, but I think it applies to MassSave. Like, if someone's bringing you the answer to a question you didn't know to ask, or you haven't had time to ask, or you haven't because you're doing 72 other things, like, I think that's tricky, and this is a panel of resources to be like, I can make one phone call, and hopefully they won't charge you $8,000 out of the gate, but like, you know, other things.
Yeah.
It'll just be a little easier, right? It'll be like a slightly smoother path, and that's here, so.
Yes, and hopefully you know some of the questions to ask.
And now you
too.
have questions, exactly.
Absolutely. So, Phillip, I actually wanted to ask you a question. You have clearly gone down the sustainability path and journey. You've been doing it for a while now. Do you see a competitive advantage as a result of that? Do you see, you know, through marketing or business, that customers are actually drawn to it, or simply that it's actually just been really good for the bottom line?
It's definitely good for the bottom line. What we get sometimes, especially in our food service line, is when we can, or a private label, when they can do a declaration that they didn't expect to be able to do. So, you know, you can put something on your packaging that says made sustainably, or the Marine Stewardship Council is a real big one because we sell a lot of seafood. A lot of companies love that, you know, hey, we source responsibly. There's a little tag that goes on the front of the pictorial, and it puts them in, like Whole Foods won't buy food that's not MSC. So now we have the ability to say, we are MSC, you can go, now Whole Foods is now a potential customer for you. So we definitely get benefit that way.
Yeah, okay.
Well, just on that,
Yeah.
I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would think that part of your decision-making around that when you're looking at sustainability, you are thinking about how do my customers and suppliers, what do they value in sustainability? Like, in other words, there are different ways to be sustainable, and people can treat different resources. Well, that's not really green energy, or that's not. It matters what your stakeholders are valuing, and that's one of the things where what we try to do is say, okay, what's your end state? What are you trying to do? Like, what does sustainability mean to you, or your investors, or your customers? And then how do we back into a solution that helps you make progress on that? Because it's not the same to everyone. So it matters what your certification is, or what the hurdle you have to get over. So.
Yeah. Do we have any, before I keep going, do we have any questions from audience? Okay. My next question was actually going to be from Micaelah. So you talked a lot about how in the last session especially, startups can actually provide a lot of benefit. It's kind of difficult to work with them at the outset, especially if you're not familiar with it, but they can drive a lot of the innovation within your facility. So can you talk a little bit about examples you've seen of this, or how a startup can actually help you get more innovative?
Sure. I think we ran a study with, I think it was like 350 Massachusetts-based manufacturers on would you or why would you want to work with startups, and plenty of people were like, thank you. But the people who said yes, they were interested, or yes, they had, and here's why, was it helped, and this was entirely working on behalf of clean tech startups that I was talking to, so that's why we were asking. But it was, it was like a draw for their workforce. It gave some of their younger engineers or workers, I don't know that everyone was the same credential, like kind of excited them, like, oh, we're gonna get to work on building the new big belly trash cans. Those were the first 3 revs of those were all made in Massachusetts. We're gonna get to help work on building clean carbon, this weird plane thing, anyway, sorry. But like getting to know that you were part of the supply chain and building something that would have an incredible environmental impact was really exciting. I think some people put that into their story. So you're talking about, like you have these credentials and you have things that you can use in your marketing when you say that you're working with small companies that are 100% solar powered, or that they're reinventing new ways to make clean concrete. Like that's a cool thing to be able to talk about, if that matters. I realize that's not necessarily saving you money out of the gate. But so I think, and then the third one was just kind of, it's neat to be around people who are changing the world potentially. We all are, but when someone's making the first clean steel, like that's cool. They're doing that in Cambridge, by the way, and in Brazil. Anyway, so I think that was one piece. The other story I told that I think is interesting is startups all need pilots. They all need people to help be their first customers or their 5th customers or whatever. And so we had a story of a sensor company that could help you understand where resources were being used throughout your floor, right? They knew when you were running an air conditioner that you shouldn't be, or when the lights were on when they shouldn't be because no one was there. And so we had a manufacturer that let them come in, ended up making some parts for them. They redesigned a couple things, and they're still working together. And that's we don't have a ton of those stories, but they're there and they're potentially available, and I think that's really cool. So.
Absolutely, thank you. And then along those lines, maybe I'll just make this an open-ended question, but I think there's a general perception that sustainability is actually very expensive, and that to implement some of these changes, you have to have a lot of upfront costs to kind of get over that hump and then access the benefits. So what is your advice about sort of balancing cost savings with long-term sustainability and getting over that upfront cost?
I would just say when you have had an energy audit done, and the initial ones, you're getting there's a cost benefit analysis. There's an ROI that's attached to each project. The incentives are tied to reductions in KWH or reductions in decatherms, and so you're going to see what that payback is. So it's not, I think you're going to end up with a piece of equipment if you decide to go down that path, but you have a good sense of what that return is. And so it's not a always yes, but it is, situational. I suspect that you probably have looked at your floor and looked at some investments and said, return's a little long on that, right? That's a little rich. I think we're going to do this other, but maybe it's on our capital plan, or maybe, but these other ones, the paybacks are short. So I think you get a lot of data there to make good decisions that really answer or address that concern, like, well, is this worthwhile? You know, does it make sense? Is it too expensive? I think you have a story about just, I'm getting better equipment, you know what I mean? So there's more than just efficiency at play.
Yeah. And I would add that there's often a lot more opportunity than people anticipate. So when you're looking at these scoping study reports, at like a report out after you've had your audit, it's usually 10, maybe 15 different individual projects that would have pretty significant energy impact. A lot of them could be, 6-month ROI, like really quick hits, really cost-effective projects. And then there's those, larger, capital improvements with new equipment. But even the new equipment can be pretty quick returns as well.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're considering increased throughput.
And sometimes things are not, it's not always new equipment. Sometimes if you're just not aware of something, so demand charges, I'm sure you're all aware of what you see on demand, but demand is basically set for the month by your peak moment when you say, I'm asking the most from the utility, and that's what sets your demand. As an example, we're working with a manufacturer that creates the safety glass, so the glass that breaks. The way that that's done is when it's hot, they blow air into it, and air gets trapped inside, and that's what creates the break points. So they have these machines, and they have 2 giant machines side by side. If those run coincidentally, they double their demand charge. The process only takes like 10 minutes per machine, but as long as they know that they alternate it, they don't double. That's something that they might not have even been aware of. But that kind of like recognition of like, whoa, what's happening on our floor in terms of our demand, that's just an operational piece. And it doesn't work for everybody, but those kinds of things can be revealed when people start to look under the hood a little bit more. So.
It's a if you don't ask, you don't know situation.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know, so
Absolutely.
go at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of you during your presentations talked about sort of the writings on the wall with a lot of this, right? Europe is very much ahead of time, ahead of the US, with sort of where they are in their timeline with sustainability efforts, reporting requirements. If, I'm a manufacturer and I want to expand sort of globally, or just kind of be ahead of what's to come, what are the first steps that I take if I want to start doing ESG reporting, or sort of, looking at what kind of information might future customers even ask of me? Where do I start? I'm looking at you.
Stumped me.
I'm looking at you. Talked about your reporting in Europe. So.
Yeah. So networking is huge, of course, but I think that's kind of an ancillary endeavor. Primarily, you need these catalogs are available. So if you're a supplier of something, whatever it might be, you can reach out to these large companies and ask them what their requirements are. That oftentimes they'll have, I won't share the company, but they'll send you a catalog. I have a 100-page catalog, I think, from one customer, and it's everything from what does the package have to say on it to how do you palletize it. Here's the size of the cases that it has to be. Here's the high and tie. It's like it's all there.
Sometimes you find that stuff on company websites as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the news has a lot of it. When you start to talk about reading online and doing Google searches and things like that, a lot of that information is there. But we've gotten it primarily from the bidding process and from talking to customers and talking to other CEOs and VPs and other things of other organizations. What are you coming up against? What are you seeing? And using the resources available, like in our particular case, it's National Grid. Eversource does the same thing, but what are you guys doing? What do you see? Do you have a contact in California that you can call for me? Because California seems to be, a few years ahead of everybody. What are they doing right now? What are they seeing? So that's where we've gotten our information from so far. And I cheated a little bit, and I have a Nestle background, so I learned a lot of stuff from them too when I was working with them.
Great. I'm getting my 10-minute warning, I saw, so I'll just put it out there. Any questions before I start start to wrap up.
You're almost at 5 now.
So maybe I'll just, I'll posit this. I asked it in our last session, so I hope you had a little bit of time to maybe think of it, but we're all leaving here, and if we haven't done it yet, we're getting an energy audit, right? We're scheduling one. Other than that, what are maybe 1, 2, or 3 things that you would say, go do this in addition to getting your energy audit, because it's easy, it'll cost you nothing or little, and, you know, pay for itself in the long term. Anybody wanna go first? Not you again.
I had mentioned before in the last session, but sub-metering is something that has come down a lot in cost. And if you have a production line where basically your only data point is the 15-minute interval data you can get a month after it happens, it's very hard to get down into like what's inefficient in my line, where are the, you know, what's the state of my equipment, and that can be true even for your HVAC and building controls and that kind of thing. So it's not free, but the paybacks for that can be very short if you identify things where there are both either efficiencies or ways that you can do preventive maintenance that avoid costs. So that's come down quite a bit. So that might be something.
Okay. Any others?
I would do a lighting audit, and I would add lots of sensors so you can turn them off when you need to, but that's just me. And then I would also say, there's a group called Forge. They do not pay me. They're not, this is just, I think, a best practice, but there's a group called Forge, and I would find them, and if you're interested in working with startups, they're pretty plugged in to probably 4 of the bigger ones in the state that can help you if you are interested in that.
Great.
I would recommend insulate things that are hot. Consider putting a VFD on most of your, you know, motors and fans, and keep up with your compressed air leaks and steam trap leaks and.
Okay. Any others?
Yeah, well, a more roundabout answer, I guess, is don't ignore your infrastructure. Those hidden landmines in the background that you know, you don't pay attention to, and all of a sudden they don't work, and now you can't do something. A lot of these audits and metering and all this, they tell you a lot of information about that infrastructure. Like, you know, if we didn't have a boiler, we don't run. If we don't have compressed air, we don't run. And it's great because they always run. And then one day they don't, and all of a sudden we can't make product, and I'm getting yelled at because we can't make product. It's like if we had the metering information then, we know that, hey, we were up here, and now all of a sudden we've crept down for no apparent reason. What's going on? It's a hidden landmine that I think we all have when we're producing product. And kind of, again, when it's on the floor, I can see it. When it's in the back room in the closet that I never open, I don't really pay attention. Gotta pay attention to this stuff. And this is all available to us with this programs.
Knowledge is power.
Thank you all. I think that's a wealth of information from our wonderful panelists. If you have questions for anyone, please come see us. We're here. We can chat